Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to review the new short track episode called The Escape Artist. This one did have a few neat moments and a kind of a surprise ending, so I'm going to go into spoilers if you didn't see it already. And once again, the thing that bugs me most is the continuity problems it creates. And I talked about the problem with Harry Mudd in this show in one of my reviews of the episode in which he was in. First of all, the way they showed his character was kind of like a psychopath villain, but in the original series he was kind of like a comic relief character. He wasn't really a big villain. I think the same idea was later used for the Ferengi, kind of greedy conman villains who are mostly comic relief in comedy episodes, so the original Harry Mudd was the same kind of villain. The way they showed him in Discovery was as a sadistic psycho, so that's more similar to Fajo in TNG, the guy who kidnapped Data, so that's the type of villain they made Harry Mudd into in this show. And what pissed me off most in that episode is that they just let him go in the end without any repercussions for what he did and what he tried to do, and despite him knowing Starfleet's biggest secret, which he wanted to sell to the Klingons, so despite all of that they let him go, and in this short track suddenly Starfleet has a warrant for his arrest. Suddenly they're paying bounty hunters to catch him, so how does that make sense when the Discovery simply released him before? Another continuity problem was when they showed his wife Stella, and she looked much younger and hotter than the way she looked like in the original series, and this is supposed to be just 10 years before. Also, why the hell did he want to leave her when she looks like this? So it doesn't make sense. Also, the height differences: in the original he looked much taller than her, and here they're basically the same height. Even though I think she was wearing heels, so maybe that explains it. So in this short track they show that Starfleet is paying bounty hunters to catch Mudd, and he was captured by a bounty hunter who wants to deliver him to a Federation starship. There's a part in which he reads his full list of crimes, and once again a continuity issue because it doesn't really match what we saw directly in the original series. Here's a snapshot from the original series, and it says his offenses are smuggling, transport of stolen goods, purchase of space vessel, and yet in this short track that bounty hunter says that he's guilty of a lot more stuff, including penetrating a space whale. So how come all these other charges simply disappeared in the future? So was his record expunged? I guess just like Michael's record of mutiny was simply forgiven and erased from history, so I guess Mudd's crimes were also somehow erased from the record, even though we saw directly in this short track that Starfleet is actually looking for him for these charges, and yet later a Starfleet computer doesn't remember any of those crimes. Maybe it's because he received punishment for those crimes and so they were erased, and so the offenses we saw in the original series were new offenses after he was released from prison or from a psychiatric treatment, so maybe that's the explanation. And now let's get to the surprise of this short track. In the very end, when that bounty hunter delivers him to Starfleet and is apparently expecting Starfleet to pay him with gold pressed latinum, which is a bit odd for Starfleet when they're always saying they don't use money and yet they always pay everybody else with money. And also using bounty hunters to do their dirty work also doesn't really sound like Starfleet. So anyway, the bounty hunter delivers him to the ship, and then the Starfleet officer shows him that it's not the real Mudd, that they actually have a bunch of Mudds who are all androids, and then we see that the real Mudd is on a ship full with androids who look like him, and he's basically selling them to various bounty hunters for money, and also stealing a whole bunch of stuff on the way. We see a lot of rare and unique items on his ship, like the Mona Lisa painting, which interestingly was later in the possession of Fajo, the guy who kidnapped Data later. So the thing with the androids was actually a neat twist, but it once again creates problems with continuity because Mudd only discovered the androids in his second appearance on the original show. The first time they met him, he didn't have any androids, he had some scheme selling some women to settlers, and he didn't have any androids yet, otherwise he would simply be selling female androids to the settlers, which is not what he did. And the next time they met him was on the planet with androids, and then Kirk asked him how did he get there, and he tells them that he stole a ship and then accidentally stumbled into this planet with the androids. So he didn't have the androids previously, unless I guess he lied when he told that story. Maybe he did know about this planet previously, maybe he did use some of the androids previously, but if that was the case, why did he stop using them? So it doesn't really make much sense. Why did he stop using the androids for a while and then only later went back to them? And another issue I have with this ending was that basically all these androids ended up on a Starfleet ship. So how come Starfleet didn't take these androids and reverse engineer them? I mean, there was a whole episode in TNG in which a Federation scientist wanted to get his hands on Data so that he could replicate him to create more androids for the Federation. And yet, a century earlier, Starfleet got its hands on a whole bunch of androids who seem to be even more advanced than Data in some ways. These androids can look exactly like humans, they can also mimic human behavior perfectly, so much so that you wouldn't be able to distinguish such an android from the real person. So doesn't that mean these androids are more advanced? So wouldn't Starfleet want to create androids like this to send them on dangerous missions, just like Maddox wanted Data for? I guess the difference with Data is that he's actually sentient, while these androids are only programmed and don't really have any kind of real soul, you could say. And another issue is that in the original series it was stated that all these androids are linked together and are controlled by the same computer, so they don't have an independent mind. That was directly stated by Spock, and later used in the episode to defeat all the androids, and they defeated them by simply acting illogically in front of them until they had the smoke coming out of their heads. So I guess they were not really that advanced androids compared to Data, since they were defeated so easily. But if all these androids had to be controlled by a computer, so how could Mad send them on long distance missions? How could they continue to operate independently? I guess maybe they were still all linked together through some long range transmissions. Maybe that would explain that scene with the flashbacks, because we see the Mad in this episode, who turns out to be an android. We see him getting kind of flashbacks of things that happened to him previously, but maybe it was actually what was happening with the other androids in other places. And since they're all linked together, that explains how come he remembers it as well. And it was kind of funny that he kept repeating the exact same lines in every situation, so we'll later find out why that is. Since they're all androids which are programmed to behave in a certain way, then that's why in all these situations we see him basically saying the same exact lines. And I did like the twist itself in the end, but the continuity issue is bugging me. I mean, if they want to do their own thing, why not just create their own character? They decided to use an established character from the original series, then they should try to make it fit. If they want to do their own thing, then they should simply create another character. Maybe it would have been better, it would make more sense, because how likely is it that you keep stumbling into the same exact guy? It makes the galaxy look smaller. That's why I prefer the idea of the Ferengi, which was just a whole species of guys like that, which you keep running into, which makes sense because there are billions of them in the galaxy, and yet in this case it's the same exact guy who you keep encountering in a big galaxy, which doesn't make sense. So maybe they should have simply created a new character of that type and not use an established character if they don't bother to actually tie it well with continuity. Because he shouldn't even have the androids yet. He didn't yet meet the androids on the planet. He didn't have them in his first encounter with the Enterprise. So why does he have them here? And also there was a funny goof. They show that he's dressing up as a woman to sell all these androids to the bounty hunters. With a mask which makes him sound, I think it's a homage to that scene in The Return of the Jedi in which Leia dressed up as some kind of alien and had kind of a garbled voice, so he has the same kind of voice when he's dressed as that woman. But the funny thing is that if you look closely at his body, when he first appears as a woman, his body looks like a womanly body, and yet later on when he removes the mask, the moment that he removes the mask, one of the other androids passes in front of the camera, suddenly it's a man's body inside that same costume, when previously it was obviously a female inside that costume. So because he removes the mask, suddenly the body changes also, so that kind of bugged me. This reminds me of a lot of older shows in which the same kind of thing happened. Whenever someone was disguised to someone else because of a mask, then the body should still look the same, and yet oftentimes the body also changed. There was a funny scene with Jonathan Frakes when he appeared on the Superman TV show, Lewis and Clark. There was a scene of him getting disguised as someone else who is much thinner than him, but the moment he removed the mask to reveal Jonathan Frakes, suddenly the body itself also changed. So it's the kind of goof you find in old TV shows, and yet they did it here as well, and I don't know why. Why couldn't it simply be his body all the time? I guess because they didn't want to ruin the surprise, so when they showed that female bounty hunter, they wanted it to look like a woman. But why do that in that last scene of the reveal, when they showed him sitting in the chair? Before removing the mask he looked like a woman, then an android passes in front of the camera the moment he removes the mask, and suddenly the body changed. Maybe we can excuse it by saying he used some kind of technology that shaped his body into the right shape, and once he removes the mask it deactivates that costume and then he looks like himself. So I guess that's the excuse we can invent. So the question remains, why exactly did he stop using these androids? I guess we can say maybe he encountered that planet with the androids in the past and he took some of them, but why did he stop using them and why only later he returned to them? So that is a continuity problem in my opinion. And the fact that Starfleet got its hands on a whole bunch of androids which they didn't do anything with. And a century later, when they encountered Data, suddenly they wanted to dismantle Data to study him to make more androids. So why not do that with these older androids? So it makes no sense. Just like with the holograms, why did the Starfleet stop using the holograms for a long while when they had such good holograms? I mean, in some episodes of Discovery, they even show that they can use hologram mirrors in their quarters. And it can look exactly like the real person, so that indicates that they can produce perfect holograms. I guess all the other holograms we see are of lesser quality because of the transmission itself, because it's a long distance transmission and so the hologram isn't perfect, but if they want to create a mirror, then it can create a perfect hologram. So that indicates the holographic technology itself is pretty superior, so why the hell did they stop using that for a century later? So it doesn't make sense, and so that's one of my biggest problems with this show, that it doesn't care about continuity, and yet claiming it's in the prime timeline. So that's one of the things that pissed me off. So that's all I wanted to say about this short track. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.